So this is the sufficient assumption number 7. And it's another one we're talking about the geological record. Test makers are incredibly obsessed with the early end of the world, dinosaurs, meteors, explosions, etc. So we're just gonna try to make this like really short and sweet. Like we're trying to like really boil these things down into like reasonable chunks of information. We're not getting too into the weeds. We're not getting too flustered with scientific words. We're just gonna go. Okay, so whew, although the geological record contains some hints of major meteor impacts preceding mass extinctions, there were many extinctions that did not follow any known major meteor impacts. So basically what they're saying here is that, there's some cases where our geological record says that there was a meteor impact before an extinction. And we can go ahead and kind of keep track of that. There's like some cases where the major meteor impact precedes a mass extinction. There's also many cases where um, there were no impact, or there were extinctions, but there weren't any impacts. Like that X means not, I guess, in this case. They also say that there are many records of major meteor impacts that do not seem to have been followed by mass extinction. So we've got these major meteor impact that did not follow by an extinction. And then their conclusion is that the geological record suggests there's no consistent causal link between major meteor impacts and mass extinctions. So basically they're saying yes, it is true that these things are sometimes related to one another, but sometimes we have extinctions, sometimes we have impacts, and they're not necessarily linked. So we're trying to ask ourselves, what from our answer choices are we going to plug in to guarantee this conclusion, guaranteeing that there is no consistent causal link? Okay, so let's just start with A. If there were a consistent causal link between these impacts and extinctions, then all major meteor impacts would be followed by mass extinctions. If we assume this and plug this in, because this is a bottom-up question, if we were to plug in A, this would guarantee our conclusion. They're saying, okay, there's no causal link because if there were, we would have impacts and they would be followed by extinctions. We wouldn't have these cases where there was just an impact or just an extinction if there was a causal link. So this one's looking pretty nicely. B, major meteor impact and mass extinctions cannot be consistently causally linked unless many mass extinctions have followed major meteor impacts. So this is also looking really nice, but the issue with this one is that we have an unless, that indicates necessity, and they're saying unless many have followed major meteor impacts. We would need this to completely justify our conclusion and say all, absolutely all, or something really, really strong. Many just means like, it could be as many as one. It's kind of like some. You just need one case for this to be a non-zero amount. C, of the mass extinctions that did not follow any known major meteor impacts, so these is one-off extinctions, few, if any, followed major meteor impacts of which the geological record contains no hints. So and they're talking specifically about extinctions and nothing else. We're not addressing how this relates to consistent causal link, just some random information. D, if there is no consistent causal link between these impacts and extinctions, then not all mass extinctions could have been followed by major meteor impacts. So they're saying, if it's true, then not, it could be, if there's no link, then not all extinctions could have been followed. But this is not guaranteeing our conclusion because, again, we're looking at could, not all. We're saying not all mass extinctions could have followed major meteor impacts. This is exactly like this would go in with exactly what's being said, but this is relying on this idea that not all mass extinctions could have followed. They're saying like it's the way that things are being described, this is how it would have to be. It's a kind of circular reasoning and it's not actually guaranteeing anything. they're saying if there is no consistent causal link, well, our conclusion is saying that there is no consistent causal link. So you can't say if. We need to make sure we're guaranteeing this is the case. The difference between D and A, D puts like there is no consistent causal, like if there is no consistent causal link, then not all mass extinctions could have been followed. If we take the contrapositive of this, what it says is if all mass extinctions could have been followed by meteor impacts, could have followed major impacts. So I don't know, we could kind of shorthand it and say like, if all were followed, then there would be a consistent causal link. What A is doing is it's saying like if there's a consistent causal link, then we have these things being linked together, like I almost call it a meatball. These major meteor impacts are followed by mass extinctions. The contrapositive A is that if they weren't linked, if we have these one-off situations, then there is no consistent causal link. And that's what we want. This is in a necessary condition. Whereas in order to get the no consistent causal link, it puts that in the sufficient, meaning it could happen, but it's not guaranteed. We want our conclusion to be guaranteed, so we're making our conclusion necessary here in A, but it's sufficient, and it just stays sufficient in D. So that's why we wouldn't pick it as our answer. With E, there could be a consistent causal link. Okay, could, not very committal. Even if not every major meteor impact has been followed. What? They're saying, there could be a consistent link, but that's not what we're trying to get to in our conclusion. We're trying to guarantee that there is no consistent causal link. This would actually weaken our argument and make it really hard to justify our conclusion. So based off of this, we would go with A as our answer, because A is going to make sure that we are guaranteeing our conclusion when we plug this in.